Buhari cancels trip to Rwanda for launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Youth groups intensify campaign for voter registration as they mobilize for more political participation.
Kogi State government to raise panel on inquiries on recent headers farmers clash in the state.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we discuss the issue of access to and affordability of financial services in Nigeria.
Now, we'll begin the program by referring to this quote from the Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, during a recent book launch on banking reforms in Nigeria. He said, and I quote, "Nigerians are puzzled by the scenario in which they give their hard-earned funds to the banks at single-digit interest rate, but cannot get anything less than a double digit when they seek loans for their businesses or mortgages or their homes."
Now, all of this, the Vice President said, occurring against the backdrop of what seems to be regular declarations of hefty profits by the banks. Now, Rhoda, what the Vice President was clearly referring to was the whole question of access to as well as affordability of financial services in Nigeria, a question that has remained unanswered as most Nigerians are left out of the banking experience. In fact, the Vice President did conclude that Nigerian banks have not significantly impacted the lives of Nigerians.
Well, if you think that is harsh, then check the statistics. For instance, about 40% of Nigeria's population, or about 60 to 90 million Nigerians, are said to be underbanked. This means that a significant number do not have access to banking facilities, let alone banking services or products.
Now, among those who have bank accounts, many are unable to access financial services ranging from personal, mortgage or business loans, as well as savings and payments, remittances, capital markets, as well as insurance services. The reasons, obviously, are many.
But of the issues mentioned, perhaps most troubling is the issue of access to loans. The Central Bank of Nigeria says there is a low level of credit penetration in the country, which is estimated at 5.3% of the nation's adult population.
Now, added to what Rhoda has just said, of course, is the high lending rate, which is not less than double digits, sometimes averaging, again, not less than 25%. In some cases, we've heard of rates at about 30%. Yeah. Now, which means that only a few Nigerians can actually access bank loans, and many simply just do not bother to approach their banks for facilities.
Now, this affects the economy in no small way as businesses, particularly small and medium enterprises, fail to take off or even expand by making growth nearly impossible.
So, one question to ask is, how can more Nigerians have access to affordable financial services? And how can the bottlenecks standing in the way of access to banking products be eliminated? And what are the policymakers as well as regulators doing to turn this unsavory situation around?
Well, Kingsley, these are some of the questions we shall be raising on the program this morning. We shall engage experts on accessing affordability of financial services in Nigeria. And Kingsley, you know, a lot of times people are able to access these services. Some have access to them. That's but right. The issue is how affordable are they?
How affordable, that's right. I mean, if you're talking about interest rates of anything from 20 to 30%, that's a killer. What kind of business, what kind of returns are you expecting on your investment?
And sometimes even the short, time frame in which you're giving to actually, pay back some of
that's right. The tenor of the facilities is usually short term, which is why a number of them get into trading, short-term trading, so they can have very quick turnaround, and then, of course, are able to pay back the what some have described as the usurious interest rates that we have in the economy. Compare this, for instance, to what you have in other economies, where interest rates are single digits and, of course, less than 3%
Yeah.
in most other economies.
Well, I'm Rhoda Anonam and I welcome you to the program this morning. We're live on Africa's largest television network, the NTA. It's Good Morning, Nigeria. And
I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join Rhoda in also welcoming you to the program, in the course of which we shall have our regular companion segments. And this, of course, will include business, newspaper review, and the others. In the meantime, we're having the news right now. And our colleague who's giving us the news in brief is Anne Jibuno. Hi, Anne.
Hi, Kingsley and Rhoda. Good morning. Here's the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has cancelled his planned trip to Kigali, Rwanda for the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area scheduled for this week. A statement by the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Tope Elias Fadile, says Mr. President's decision is to allow time for input from Nigerian stakeholders. The Katsina State government is to partner with the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to decentralize the ongoing voter registration exercise to ward levels in the state. Governor Aminu Bello Masari stated this at the formal inauguration of the El Mazouk for Buhari and Masari Project 2019 in Daura, Katsina State.
Independent people to show their support and solidarity, especially to President Muhammadu Buhari and to the little effort Katsina State is doing to improve the quality of lives of the people of the state.
Well, youth groups are not leaving anything to chance in a bid to be involved in politics and governance. While some are campaigning for the reduction of age for elective positions, others are sensitizing their peers to obtain the permanent voter cards. This was at a PVC power sensitization in Abuja.
We have a program called Engaging Emerging Voters. So we're going around the country, presently in 12 states across the country, to reach out to young people who have not even turned 18, to try to make them understand why they should go register.
If we want to have the kind of persons we want in the government, then I think the young people, more of us, we need to participate, we need to vote.
Delegates at the 2018 National Council on Establishment have expressed gratitude to President Buhari for his support and provision of enabling environment for civil service to thrive in Nigeria. This was part of the communique issued at the end of the National Council on Establishment meeting in Owerri, Imo State.
Council expresses appreciation to His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari for his purposeful leadership of the nation and the inspirational direction he has given to the public service through the change agenda.
The general public, particularly the media, have been cautioned against reporting unguarded utterances and comments of politicians that can overheat the polity. The call was made by Niger State Deputy Governor Mohammed Ketso against the background of sensational reportage of events in the state and the country.
The election here is becoming more visible, and some desperate politicians are out to overheat the polity by their utterances and comments. I wish to express profound gratitude for the continued support and understanding this administration has been enjoying from the respected members for the Fourth Estate.
And in Kogi State, we hear that the government is to set up a panel of inquiry to unravel the remote and immediate causes of the recent herders-farmers clashes that claimed lives in Dekina, Bassa and Omala local government areas of the state. Governor Yahaya Bello stated this at Oganenugu while conducting an on-the-spot assessment of the affected areas.
A particular team will be deployed immediately to ascertain the extent of damages with a view of at least giving some palliative measures.
Well, that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Rhoda and Kingsley after this break.
Unemployment
notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem frontally through revival of agriculture.
Is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Reorganized, trained, and fully equipped, we are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime, we bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism, and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
Dettol team is visiting schools to teach children how to protect themselves from diseases. Do you know how we get illnesses like diarrhea, cough, and cold? No! They are spread through germs which are everywhere. You collect germs that cause diseases. You pick up germs from any surface, like when you don't wash your hands after going to the toilet, while playing. And then you can get sick because of germs. That's why you need to fight germs to stay healthy by washing your hands and taking your bath with Dettol soap to protect from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Wash your hands. What you have to do is bath yourself. Dettol soap every day. Wash your hands.
Olúwa ṣẹ́gun fún mi. Ó ṣé mo dúpẹ́. Ọba dùn ẹnu.
Àmín.
Ọmọ òní ní kò gbé tí wá kò ń gẹjẹ.
Àmín.
O ò ní kábàámọ̀.
Àmín.
Àbùkù ò ní kàn ẹ́ o.
Àmín máa.
Ayé ò ní rí ẹ mú o.
Àmín.
O ò ní dààmú. O ò ní ṣìrìn. O ò ní rí mi. Ó yá wọnú ògo tuntun lọ. Ẹlẹ́dàá mi.
Ẹ tàmí yín kọ́.
Ṣé ìwọ ti rókun tó gbẹ̀rí?
Kò lè gbẹ́ bí. Àwọn ò ní sọ̀rọ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀.
Ó yá fi sí spíkà.
Ṣé ẹ̀bùn látọ̀mù mi gbé wá fèmí?
Ọlọ́run á ràn yín lọ́wọ́. Ẹ̀yin náà lè ṣerú ẹ̀ fáwọn.
Get 10 times your recharge value to call and browse anyhow. Recharge with *220 star the pin hash to enjoy this offer available to new and existing subscribers.
Mr. Anansa, èmi ń gbàdúrà. Ìwọ ń polówó ọjà, ìwọ náà borí ẹ̀ wá kó wá gbàdúrà. Á dà fún ẹ. Ṣé orí bó ti ń tajà fẹ́ lòmíì? Àwọn máa sìn.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Kehinde suffers from indigestion. His twin Taiyi suffers from heartburn. Sometimes it's the other way around, or both. That's why they use Gaviscon Double Action. It soothes within 3 minutes and lasts for up to 4 hours. For double relief from heartburn and indigestion, Gaviscon Double Action.
Sore throats, it's often caused by bacteria and viruses. Feels like they're having a party. You need Strepsils. It soothes the pain, plus it fights the germs with 2 germ-killing actives. Double power in 1 lozenge. Bye-bye sore throat. Take Strepsils.
When I was a little girl, I loved spending time with Mum and Grandma cleaning the house. I knew what Grandma's secret was. I was so excited to sing in the choir. And your shirts are always so white. I knew what Mum's secret was. Today, I'm a modern woman that still trusts the secret passed down to me. It's Jik, of course, the trusted bleach which can be used all around your house for amazing results.
Shh, it's our little secret.
It's no secret. Jik removes 101 stains. Just Jik it.
All right, now it's time for us to talk business with oil prices inching up, and Brent, of course, is now said to be nearly $70 per barrel. Plus, the federal government receives commendation for growth in the solid minerals subsector. Let's join our correspondent Joy Uzo for details of the stories.
Welcome to Business News. We'll begin with a brief review of the performance of the capital market for the week ended 16th March 2018, where a total turnover of 2.444 billion shares worth 36.665 billion naira in 26,712 deals were traded by investors on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. The NSE or share index and market capitalization depreciated by 2.85% and 3.26% to close the week at 41,935.93 and 15.002 trillion naira respectively. Next is a graphic summary of Friday's closing figures. Moving on now, most recently, the federal government, as part of its diversification agenda, went into partnership with the World Bank, attracting an $150 million grant from the global financial institution to develop the solid minerals sector. Coming under this project, World Bank Assisted Mineral Sector Support for Economic Diversification Project, Mindeva, Nigeria. The economic significance of the project for Nigeria is no doubt enormous, part of which is ordered to create wealth and jobs. How much of the impact of the project is currently being felt? NTA Business News spoke with the Ebonyi State Commissioner for Solid Minerals, Dr. Francis Oji.
Since the inception of this administration, they have given so much impetus in developing the mining sector. It was not so then, especially since the inception of the present minister, the minister and the minister of state. They have been so robust in articulating ideas, in bringing in so many innovations and innovatives that encourage mining. And because of that, we think that they should expand more into the states. There's so much concentration in the center. But what is happening now shows that they recognize the need to go into the states.
That's much we can take on Business News. For now, we'll keep you updated in subsequent bulletins. I am Joy Uzo. Many thanks for watching.
Many thanks, Joy Uzo, for that business news package. Now time for us to review the newspapers we have with us this morning.
Newspaper reviewer Bayo Atoyebe is right here with us for today's review session. Bayo, good morning.
Morning, Kingston. Morning, Rhoda.
Good morning,
Nigeria.
I hope you enjoyed your weekend.
I did.
Restful.
And you too?
All right, that's pretty good.
All right, Kingsley, let's begin with the New Telegraph. And on the New Telegraph, it leads with this story. It says, 2019 PDP has no candidate to match Buhari. 2019, PDP has no candidate to match Buhari, says Oyegun. And with a couple of writers, there says, Atiku, Lamido, Dankwambo, Markafi seeking relevance. PDP ask northern leaders for 2 acceptable aspirants. And then Yar'Adua's associates revive structure. Finally, presidency, why Buhari can't declare now. That's a story that's trending in page 5 and 10 of the New Telegraph this morning. Let's go to the lead story for the Authority newspaper. I tell you, all the papers, the lead stories seem to be different this morning. Almost all the papers says DSS naps arms suppliers. Benue Taraba killings. DSS naps arms supplier with a rider as Army kills 4 militia, arrest 9 in Bauchi and Benue. I'll take that again. The lead story says Benue Taraba killings, DSS naps arms supplier. That's the lead story for the authority, Kingsley.
That's right. Let's take a look at the front page of the three papers that I have. Blueprint, for instance. The three lead stories are different, but there's something on Taraba attacks. That's the kicker for the lead story of Blueprint newspaper. Police arrest 54 and Mieti Allah kicks with 2 riders. Fish out killer headers. Obaseki orders police. This is in reaction to the 3 persons who were killed in Edo State over the weekend. And then troops nab 12 in Benue. Troops nab 12 in Benue. And then fish out killer headers. Obaseki orders police. Now, you go to the front page of the Punch newspaper. There are 2 photographs there, together, of course, with the caption and one other headline immediately below. 2 photographs there say, headsmen arrested by troops of 707 Special Forces Brigade for alleged farmland destruction in parts of Benue State. And that's the motorcycle that was recovered from the suspects. And then below that is the headline, soldiers kill 4 militiamen, arrest 18 headsmen in Benue. That's on page 7 in greater detail. Now, just to return to the political story that Rhoda read from one of the papers, the lead story for this day newspaper this morning says why Buhari's re-election declaration is delayed. Why Buhari's re-election declaration is delayed. That's the lead story for it. There are, of course, other headlines. Bayo will return to the other headlines once you've discussed this one.
Well,
yes.
Let's start with the politics now. That story is attributed to the special assistant, advisor to the president of media, Femi Adesina. He says that nobody should expect the president to declare or say anything about running until May 2018, particularly Democracy Day. This is because he says the election is far away. And if the president declares now, there will be political, social, and economic initiatives to sabotage the administration. Meanwhile, the president, who was due to arrive in Rwanda for a conference, has put it off. And the explanation from the presidency is that it is to allow input from Nigeria in the initiative of the Continental Free Trade Area. And
that headline, Bayo, that headline is also on the front pages of This Day newspaper, above the nameplate of This Day. It says NLC, that's This Day now, NLC opposition puts African free trade deal in jeopardy. The story is in greater detail on page 10. Now you come also to the front page of the Punch newspaper. One of the 2 earpieces there, just beside the nameplate of the Punch, one of them says free trade, that's the kicker. Experts warn against CTFA, that's continental, it should be actually be continental free trade, not CTFA, it should be CFTA. Experts warn against CFTA pact, and federal government explains Buhari's cancelled trip. That's on page 3.
Yes, actually, the objection raised by the labor union is that it will undermine Nigeria's economic interest. And therefore, it deserves to be looked at very, very closely. But meanwhile, there have been spits of arrest which indicate that the security agencies are up and doing. In Benue, the story that Kingsley read, that you have troops of 767 Special Forces have arrested 12 headsmen under Operation IM Apatuma. They were alleged to be engaged in destroying activities of farmlands on Saturday, and they have been handed over to the police for prosecution. There is also some arrests in Bauchi. The army there were fired on by a band that were described as militants. The army returned fire, killed 4 of them, and have arrested 9 of them. Items recovered from them include 5 Dane guns, 38 motorcycles, and 9 bicycles. Also, the Department of State Services says that they have arrested an alleged notorious gun runner who had been on the run for over 10 years. He was alleged to be involved in activities like kidnapping, armed robbery, and banditry, and supplying arms. And these were operations in Nasarawa, Taraba, Benue, and Nasarawa State. A spokesman for the Department of State, Tony Okuno, says that one of those arrested says to be 7 criminal groups in Bayelsa, Ebonyi, Rivers, Imo, and Anambra, including the Benue Plateau and Nasarawa axis. Another development, 54 persons were arrested in Taraba. That's the story that Kingsley read, where Mieti Allah has ticked. Mieti Allah is saying that these were headsmen who had gone to a market, they call it Bantaji market, to go and sell their cows. And as they were coming, they were arrested. The police has confirmed that so far, they have not found anything incriminating on them, but they are still investigating their story to confirm what is there. And the Edo State government has called on security agencies to arrest the headman behind the death of 3 persons in Uboho. This is in Esa local government area of Edo State.
Just and then, Rhoda, to return to the Continental Free Trade area agreement, which the president has now put off in terms of going to. We discussed the topic on Good Morning Nigeria last week, on Thursday or so. Yes, we had 2 guests, including Nigeria's chief trade negotiator, and of course also a member of the committee. They expressed their views. And before then, a couple of weeks ago, also on Good Morning Nigeria, we also had guests discussing the status of the Register of Nigeria's treaties. There were concerns expressed that over the years, Nigeria had tended to enter into all kinds of agreements, protocols, and treaties, with vast implications for our national interest. And that sometimes it seemed as if there wasn't due consultation or consideration of our national interest before we signed on on those agreements. So perhaps it's a welcome development now that the president is saying, look, let's tarry a while, let's examine all of the implications. Because it's not so easy to say it's okay, it's a continental agreement. There are all kinds of international forces. Trade is, as I said, war by other means.
Yes. Trade organization is another way of protecting every nation's interest. So when you enter treaties, conventions, you have to ensure that they are not in conflict with their domestic interests. Particularly last Executive Council meeting, the Minister of Trade and Investment highlighted the conference that was to happen in Rwanda. So again, there is need to take a critical second look.
That's right.
All right, let's quickly take a look. Let's go back to the front page of the Authority. On the Authority, just above the nameplate, it says, Federal Government steps up preparations for toll gates return. Federal Government sets up preparations for toll gate returns. A story that's trending on page 2 of the Authority. And also page 7, it says, bank customers drop by 2 million. And coincidentally, that's an issue we're looking at. Some of the reasons that was actually stated for this decline is what we're looking at this morning. That's access and affordability to financial services, its implications on the economy. Now, let's go to the foot of the paper. And that's below the picture story. It says Buhari, OBJ, Soyinka, Nwaboys and others meet on Nigeria's future. It's a story that's on page 4. And recovers stolen 28 billion naira IDP funds, PDP tells Buhari. Quickly, let's move over now to the New Telegraph. On the New Telegraph, just above the nameplate, it says Kuka, Northern Nigeria remains the poorest region. 15 million youths on the streets begging in the north. That's a story that's above the nameplate of the New Telegraph. All right, Kingsley, let's take a look at the stories.
Let's return to the Punch newspaper. Just above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, you have 3 headlines, but we'll take 2 of them because Rhoda has already read one of the headlines. A similar headline from one of the papers about the drop in number of customers. I'll release details of Saraki and Dogara's allowances. That's according to Sage. Sage is chair of the Presidential Committee on Anti-Corruption. I'll release details of Saraki and Dogara's allowances. That's on page 10. On page 22, in detail, JAMB releases 1.3 million UTME results today. And then coming down to the bottom half of the Punch newspaper, we'll take one other headline from there, and it says, stakeholders divided over slashed Lagos land use charge. That story is on page 49. Now, back to This Day newspaper. Above the name flag of This Day newspaper, you have a story, of course, on the economy there. It says, CBN fixes April 3rd and 4th for MPC meeting. MPC, of course, stands for the Monetary Policy Committee meeting. And you have a number of riders there. One of them, of course, says, cautions, that's the CBN, cautions against high debt service cost, plus forecast 2.4% GDP growth in 2018.
Yes, talking about statistics about finances, the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System has indicated that accounts in the banks dropped from 65 million to about 63.5 million. Bank customers also dropped from 61 million in 2016 to about 59 million. And guess what? It was because of the introduction of the bank verification number and the fear of the link with illicit funds had made many to abandon their accounts. And the BVN itself grew from 26 million in 2016 to about 41.3 million. Meanwhile, they say some accounts too were lost due to the crash of Ponzi schemes. You remember Money Mondial and the
MMM.
Yes. So this is one of the
if you start giving the full meaning, people will be wondering what you mean. So if you say MMM, those who had their fingers burnt, you know, I'm sure we already remember. So this is not to mock them, but of course, quite clearly, it was a Ponzi scheme that we warned, and I'm sure those accounts have also evaporated. That's what you're saying, Bayo.
Yes, talking about toll gates that you read earlier on, in Lagos, the police has warned civil society groups who are planning to demonstrate on the Third Mainland Bridge. Again, the Land Use Act of Lagos State is still...
Land Use Charge.
Land Use Charge is still the contention. People are still protesting. And the critical worrying is that the 11.8 kilometer Third Mainland Bridge is likely to be obstructed for public use, and the police are warning about disruption of public order. JAMB is to release 1.3 million results today. So if you start for JAMB in the last 2 weeks, look out for your result. However, JAMB has revealed that they have closed circuit television and they watch all candidates who are sitting in the examination centers. And when they try to do any hanky-panky, they go to pick them up right there. So study your books and be very diligent when you see for it. Don't try to cut corners.
All right, Bayo, let's quickly take a look at the editorial this morning. It's on page 15 of the New Telegraph, and it's on security threat at Nigeria's airports. And it says events in the recent past have exposed the underlying underbelly of the entire airport security architecture in Nigeria, which urgently needs to be reviewed in order to meet new aviation challenges. And it said what first started as a rumor is becoming real as the country's aviation security was tested by bandits who have continued to rob airlines, taxing to their final stops.
Well, that is a challenge for the Federal Airports Authority. In recent weeks, there have been reports about baggage pilfering going on the increase again. Yeah. The other concerns are some of the accident that is happening with the aircraft, and those are technical areas that need to be looked at. But security for air travel around the world is a factor that is used to rate all airports. And if we want to ensure that our airports are score high in the ratings by the international body, we need to take charge of these security threats before it undermines travel to Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, just before we go, lead story from the Punch newspaper. Come for budget defense this week. National Assembly panels tell ministers. That's on page 3. In greater detail, the story speaks for itself.
Yes.
All right, Bayo Atoibe, thanks a lot for being around today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, we'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be going straight to our principal item for discussion this morning. Access to, as well as affordability of financial services in Nigeria.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
I was distressed to notice that some of the comments, especially in the social media, have crossed our national red lines by daring to question our collective existence as a nation. This is a step too far.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Give me the value pack. Helen!
You do great value shopping.
Absolutely. I'm a champion at getting value.
Then you must have bought the Harpic 200 ml.
Why Harpic when I have
this? Even after applying them 10 times, they won't give a sparkling clean toilet.
Impossible.
Challenge. Detergent and bleach can't give a sparkling clean toilet even after 10 times. But Harpic 200 ml gives a sparkling clean toilet at one go.
Wow!
Harpic 200 ml. Real deal. Now only 200 naira.
3,346 medals are up for grabs at the first National Grassroots Sports Festival, Sports for All, to discover sports talent, develop future world champions, and rejuvenate sports in Nigeria. Date 19 to 29th of April 2018. Venue, National Stadium Abuja, packages A and B. This is an opportunity for state governors to promote their achievements and for companies to promote their brand with 24 individual and team sports. For broadcast sponsorship, contact Angelo Peter I. Elosia, Chairman and Chief Coordinator, or Nick Onyisi. Organizers, Grassroots International Sports Academy and LOP Worldwide Television. Endorsed by the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports Development. Broadcast partner, NTA, the largest television network in Africa.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief. Try Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. Nurofen Express works at the source of pain, fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust.
Your perfect family is under threat by germs. Infectious diseases are now the world's biggest killer of adults and children. Every day, 16,000 children under the ages of 5 and thousands of adults die from infectious diseases. These infectious diseases are caused by germs. They are everywhere. An average human being comes in contact with over 1 million germs daily. In unclean water, dirty surfaces, in the toilet, on cuts and wounds, on your clothes. Germs can cause deadly diseases like typhoid, diarrhea, flu, and cough. To protect your family from germs, use the power of Dettol's 1 Cap Full for surface cleaning in your bathing water, in your laundry water, for first aid. To protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol Sure. Endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Our correspondent Timothy Yusuf has a background report to set the tone for our discussion this morning, which has to do with access to financial services in Nigeria.
Of Nigeria's 170 million population, up to 90 million is said to be excluded from financial services. This means that just over 50% of Nigerians access financial services. Another report by the Enhancing Financial Innovation and Access reveals that of every 10 Nigerian adults, chances are that only about 3 have bank accounts. Of those that do not have bank accounts or are excluded from financial services, the economy suffers from their absence as they cannot contribute to its growth and benefit as well. The financial services that seem far from the reach of many range from personal, mortgage or business loans, savings and payments, remittances, pensions, capital markets and insurance services. Access to credit appears to be the most troubling, as just about 4% of Nigerians succeed in getting loans from the bank, whether for personal or business purposes. High lending rate, which is mostly at double digits, sometimes reaching 26%, in some cases makes the appetite for loans fizzle out, as many people are discouraged from even attempting to borrow. This widens the gulf of financial exclusion, where people who could ordinarily impact positively on the economy are shut out. More worrisome is the fact that lack of jobs and production capacity in the economy is what many administrations continue to attempt to address. The question many ask is how can those in the rural areas access financial services with few banking facilities and little financial literacy? How can the infrastructure for financial institutions be extended to the rural areas? Can the poor and weak in Nigeria partake in the huge profits declared by financial institutions? This is the focus of Good Morning Nigeria today.
All right, thank you very, very much, Timothy Yusuf, for that background report that, of course, has laid the foundation for our discussion this morning. And we are being joined for this conversation by Dr. Bode Ayorinde. He's a member of the House of Representatives. He is the chairman, Ad Hoc Committee on Economic Recession. He's the deputy chairman, Committee on Rules and Businesses. And he's just recently launched a book on banking reforms in Nigeria. Dr. Bode Ayorinde, welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
And also we have joined us Adamu Modibo. He is a banker, a lawyer, and a former MD, CEO of Sigma Pensions. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you very much, Rhoda. Now we have two other guests right here with us in the studios. Is the chairman of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Abuja chapter. That's Mr. Odun Emeasalo. Well, Mr. Emeasalo, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, and joining us from our Lagos Network Center, of course, is a regular analyst on Good Morning Nigeria. We haven't had him for a while now. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo. Tilewa Adebajo, a pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin this discussion this way. We're looking at access to financial services in Nigeria. When you talk about that, or when you say that, the first thing that comes to the mind of an average Nigerian is the number of banks or the number of financial institutions that you have in your community or in your environment. But then it's more than that. It's far, far deeper than that. Dr. Bode Ayorinde, when we talk about financial access, affordability, what are we talking about exactly?
Well, thank you very much. In talking about financial inclusion or financial affordability, it's like you want to talk about belonging to a group, or like a club or cooperative society. And it goes beyond just banking. It has to do with savings, credit, insurance, pension, when some people are passive and some people are active. If you, for example, some people just want to leave their money in savings, while some people want to borrow it to go and do business. When you are completely out of it, you are neither saving in that group, or you are borrowing from that group, or you are enjoying insurance services from that group or pension in that group, then you are excluded from financial services completely. So in Nigeria, when we are talking about financial inclusiveness, it's not only banking, not only generally everybody look at banks, but what about insurance? Then when you look at the segment, apart from the percentage of those who are members, what is the percentage of people that can have access to the benefits of this group, like credit facilities? So it is this that is at a worrisome level in the present day financial services in Nigeria.
All right, Honorable Ayorinde, thank you very much. Let's bring in Adamu Modibo. What's your take on access to financial services? What do we mean?
Yes, I agree with Honorable, particularly areas where government can have opportunity to expand inclusion in the areas of insurance and pension. Banking is too commercialized in Nigeria. It's too elitist. And in a country where you have so many poor people, people who are living hand to mouth, you do not expect that it will be easy to have easy penetration to include many people in the banking system. But there are other areas that in my opinion, I feel government could have implemented policies to bring in people into the financial system. And that is the area of insurance, area of pension. Pension, out of about 50 million employable Nigerians, maybe less than 10 million are employed in the formal sector, both public and private. About 40 million are employed in the informal sector, and they do not have pension. Even under the Pension Reform Act 2004 and 2014 as amended, a provision is made for the purpose of covering indigent people. And it is under this provision government could have brought in kind of a savings scheme to enable these young people who are working in the informal sector to save money to be able to be included in the financial system. I'll give you an example. You will find young people hawking goods from National Stadium in Lagos up to Bar Beach running every day. They earn nothing less than 3,000 to 5,000 naira per day, but they do not save up to 100 naira per day. And it's because of lack of policy and lack of infrastructure to be able to capture them into the financial system. The same thing with insurance. Here, many of our people will say, we don't insure because, excuse me, the insurance companies do not pay if you claim. Or they will tell you, my religion does not allow me to insure. Government should sit down and find a way of seeing how to include people into the insurance scheme so that there will be penetration and accommodation of more people into the financial system. If you look at the financial inclusion strategy developed by the central bank in 2010 and implemented, and is supposed to be implemented up to 2020, only 46% of Nigerians are included. Yeah. And the target was to include up to 80% by 2020. How far have we gone? The same thing in terms of the increase of the formality of the inclusion. The people who are included into the formal sector. Only 36% when we started, and the target was to include up to 70% of Nigerians. How far have we gone? When we started mobile banking in Nigeria, it was good, but how far have we gone? ATM, how far have we gone? Many of the banks have stopped investing in ATMs. If you go, many of the ATMs, they don't work over the weekend. There will be no cash, or they are broken down, or some of them even the machine started ripping off, breaking down and so on. So I believe this is where CBN needs to be, to enforce compliance and to be able to come up with key performance indicators of banks in terms of implementation of the program of inclusion.
All right, Adamu Modibo, thank you very much for your opening statement. Let's also bring in now Mr. Odun Emeasalo. Let's have your take on access to financial services before we narrow it down, to the major prompt for our discussion this morning.
Okay, thank you. Well, I agree with what my colleagues have said. There's an element of risk in lending. And I believe that banks are being very careful. But you see that all over, like Alhaji said, all over the country, people desire to, expand their businesses and start something new. And credit is always needed. It's always an issue. Now, we find out that of a truth, people cannot access funds. And I think it's because the banks see themselves as a business. They have to make money. And they don't know how to mitigate against most of the risks available, or they don't have capacity to. So I believe, I think that there's a need for some form of regulation in this area, because what develops a country is the patriotic zeal, is the banks being able to identify that we have a role to play in growing this economy and bringing forth even more solutions, because solutions are usually designed to take care of problems. Now, even in our businesses, everybody has a risk to look into, and we design solutions for that. But you find a bank, I read that a bank made 200 billion naira already in 1 year. In 1 year. That's almost 12, 14 billion per month. Now, why should they worry about bringing in more people into their business? They made enough profit. So we must understand that finance, banking goes beyond profit. The banks have a responsibility, I would say a social responsibility, to develop the country. And this paradigm must be brought to light. And they will see that it's not just about making money, it's about bringing more people, inclusiveness, giving out more funds, and strengthening our development framework.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Odun. Well, let's get back. Let's now go to our Lagos Network Center, where we have Tiliba Dibanjo. You've listened to the other guests here. It's beyond banking. We're looking at pensions. We're looking at insurance. And, would like to, first of all, before we begin to narrow it down to issues of credit and affordability, what's your take on financial inclusion?
you very much, and good morning. Well, in any economy, there's a financial system, and it is the aggregation of savings in that system that ultimately leads to the availability of capital that is available for development. And from what all the other people on the program have said, I think it's quite clear from your presentation that we only have about 28 million unique BVN holders for a population of 180 million. So we're looking at about a very low penetration in terms of unique bank accounts. So if you do not have all your population involved in the banking system or in the financial system, it's difficult to mobilize the potential of the savings in your economy to make it available for either investments and things like that. So the problem in Nigeria is the fact that maybe only about 25%, 25 to 30% of people are included in the financial system, at least the formal financial system, and the remaining 75% are unbanked, are untapped. So that's a huge potential to mobilize savings for investments, not only for pensions, but also for the capital markets and also for insurance. Because it is these savings that we mobilize that ultimately lead to the availability of capital. However, the problem, I think more than anything else, is the fact that only 2% of Nigerians have been able to access formal credit within the financial system. I think therein lies the problem. And those are the things that we need to take a look at more seriously. Because if you do not have the capacity to mobilize the savings within your economy, it's going to be difficult for you to finance your infrastructure deficit, mortgage financing, and all the other sorts of financing that you need to be able to develop your economy properly. So from a global perspective or from a macro perspective, I think the level of financial penetration is very important. However, this is not the case if we take a look at the mobile penetration. Mobile penetration is close to 80%. And I think that is why you are beginning to see that banks are beginning to try to use mobile technology to be able to breach that gap of financial inclusion. But I guess as the program progresses, we'll look more into the details of these problems. But in summary, I think the issue is the fact that we have a financial system that we run. Both the capital markets, the insurance companies, the pension companies are all integral part of these systems. But if we're only able to reach only 30% of our population, then that means that we're not able to mobilize the savings, the potential of the savings that is available in this country. Therein lies the challenge.
All right, Mr. Adebajo, thank you very much. Now, let's refer again to the statement made by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo at a book launch recently. And his worry was that, look, banks, for instance, mobilize savings at usually a single-digit interest rate, but sometimes not more than 10, 15%. And then when they are lending, the rates are virtually usurious. And he did say that it would appear that banks haven't made much of an impact on the lives of Nigerians. In other words, the knock-on effect of banking hasn't quite been felt in the economic growth and development. So let's back again to the guests with us here in the Abuja studios. Now, if we were to take just the banking subsector or financial services, why are we having this mismatch? You know, Chilewa was talking earlier about the lack of capacity, as it were, to mobilize savings much more readily, you know, across the financial system. But why do we seem to have this dissonance of banks, you know, canvassing, you know, for deposits? They get your deposit, probably the max you can get 10%. And when they want to lend to you, they are lending at 25, sometimes 30%. And this is not an encourager, as it were, for persons who ordinarily would like to access credit. Plus, the tenor of such facilities. Let's begin with Adamu Modibo.
Thank you very much. This is an issue which has been a major problem in the banking business and industry. And the summary of it is that there is weakness of regulation. And this weakness of regulation pertains to the issue of determining the cost of funding of banks. It is entirely left to the banks to determine what their cost of funds is. regulation should determine a way of how the central bank will know what is the average cost of funding in the industry, and therefore allow banks certain markup to charge their borrowing customers. But the situation is that banks determine their own cost of funds and therefore determine their own markup, benchmarking it to the rate at which they borrow money from the central bank. And in this kind of situation, you cannot, the end user, which is the consumer of credit, the customer, cannot be able to compete or negotiate effectively with the banks to get interest rates down. And consumer protection framework of the central bank, particularly as it pertains to the financial inclusion strategy, is not well strengthened. Very few customers are aware of the consumer protection framework of the central bank policy, to be able to complain to central bank to say, this is what I'm being charged. And the second point is that most of credit does not go to the real sector. It goes to trading and import, which has a wider profit margin. And in such kind of situation, the customer can bring in goods from, let's just assume tire. He can import tire from Japan. He will be able to accommodate the exchange rate, pay interest, pay import duty, pay everything, and then also make money out of it. How about the person who produces tires inside Nigeria? He cannot afford such a rate. And therefore, if he takes a loan and the bank charges him the same rate it charges an importer, there is no way he can survive. Dunlop has left Nigeria. Where are they? They are in Ghana. Dunlop, which was a major company in the capital market here in Nigeria, all we stockbrokers know, have left Nigeria because of cost of energy and cost of credit. And they are now in Ghana. So these are the issues that I think the central bank should look at to be able to ameliorate and make it easy for people to access credit and so on. And then secondly, the issue of SMEs. It is in every economy, the engine room of growth of every economy, the SMEs. In 2012, the central bank introduced the financing, the refinancing window for SMEs of about, I think, 500 billion naira. These funds were exhausted through BOI, and up to now it has not been renewed. It's not revolving anymore. Central bank, that window has closed. How do we now make SMEs that are suffering from the weight of high interest rate from commercial loans, how do we assist them to refinance these loans to single digit? The window that CBN provided in 2012 has closed. And the entire money is exhausted, taken up by SME companies, but they are repaying because it is a risk-free window. You can only access it if your credit or the refinancing credit is guaranteed by a commercial bank. So it is very, very safe. The monies are being returned to CBN, but they are not coming out. So these are the small issues in terms of details that we need to, CBN needs to look at to be able to make easy the penetration by SMEs.
All right, thank you very much. Let's get the views of Dr. Ayorindina. Just as Kingsley said earlier, Tilewa said the banks a lot of times not being able to mobilize the savings, but then we've seen instances where the ones that have even been mobilized at single digits, people cannot access them at single digits. We're looking at digits, two digits and a very high percentage, and then people who are able to even access this cannot afford it.
Well, thank you very much. We start from the statistics that currently about 2% of adult Nigerians can access credit. That is abysmally low if we are talking about economic development. There is no way you can go into improve your business, expand your business, employ, when you cannot have access to credit facility. And just as the last speaker spoke, the regulatory authorities had a lot to do. If the regulatory authorities already have a gift agent security, you give money, you rake money from the populace at 16%. 17%. Banks sometimes don't even need to give loan to entrepreneurs. If there is a window in central bank where you can go and put your money and generate interest at as high as 16%, why do I have to give somebody under a loan
with risk?
With risk, with possibility of not being able to recover the money. It's like we are closing down the economy when we say, okay, we are mopping up. For example, when we engage the regulators, say, because we want to fight inflation. We have argued, what inflation? Which type of inflation? What is in production? The last speaker spoke about financing importation. The current regime, or in the last 15 years, the banking services we consume in this country can only support trading. And I've said it times over and over again that when you lend for trading, you are supporting production in other countries, employment in other countries. We only bring the services here within 3 months. You buy, sell, and by the time you are supporting production and employment in other countries, where we import, you are supporting unemployment
in Nigeria.
In Nigeria, and the economy. We know the economy indices and hands that are not engaged. They say they are available in the devil's workshop. Banking industry today, government have to reform. First and foremost, a situation where all commercial banks are privately owned. It doesn't happen in developed countries. Federal government itself should still show interest, have equity in a few banks so that you can control them. Presently, they are all commercial centers. When, in 1983, government divested completely from commercial banks and it went into private hands. As a private investor, you want to maximize your profit. But if government still have 20 or 30% in that place, they want to say, look, we have some motives beyond profit, which is expanding our economy. So there must be a rethinking. When IMF just come and say, oh, no, privatize all commercial banks, you have to look at it. I'm happy at the recent trend of this agreement that will also have been signed, that the president have to rethink again. If we sign this agreement, African Economic Free Trade Zone, it's just like banking. There are a lot of things we have signed, we have agreed to, which we have to review. This leads to banking reform. Because ordinarily now, the challenges we have in this country, all the socio-economic challenges we have in this country, ask me, I will say, they are all tied to the neck of banking services. If the banking is not attractive for savers, and a lot of people put their money in their pockets until they have treasury bills where they can now harvest 16%. Why do you have to even go to production? As a Nigerian, why do you want to go to production when you can put your money in central bank and generate 16% income percent? Then what type of production do you want to go to? You can as well gather all your surplus funds and go and buy treasury bills. These are the challenges. So we look at the cost, attractiveness of deposit, ownership of the banks, regulation, and securities.
Honorable Ayorinde, thank you very much. Just before we bring in Emma Salo again with us here in the Abuja, so let's return to Tilewa. Tilewa Adebajo, let's have your take on this. And there are a number of points on the table right now from both Adamu Modibo and Bode Ayorinde with regard to what banks are doing and why, the financial system permits them to do all of that. What's your take on this? On the one hand, there is a blame on regulation to say the regulatory authorities perhaps aren't doing enough, and also the activities of the regulators themselves. Each time you want to mop up, we mop up. And treasury bills at some point we saw in this economy was 18%. And of course, as been rightly pointed out, the banks who were not focusing on the risk sector, instead they focus on very low risk. So what is it that drives the banks? Is it the fact that they are over-commercialized? Why are they posting such huge profits and yet we are as poor as we are?
Thank you very much. I think, without a doubt, I think if you take a look at the Article 4 presentation from the IMF last year, you see that the deposits to loan spread for Nigerian banks are the highest in the world. I think there's no doubt about that. But when you drill down, you have to take a look at the distortions within our macroeconomic environment and the problems we've had in that recession. Because we had a recession, I think it fell on the central bank that they had to maintain financial stability. And one of the things they had to do then was to increase interest rates, which ended up favoring the banks. And I think as they rightly pointed out at that point in time, instead of funding or providing the stimulus necessary for economic growth, I think what happened is the fact that most people went into flight for safety, and it was easier to mobilize these deposits, and with the spreads you have, put them into either treasury bills or into loans. It's also important to understand that Nigerian banks are suffering a lot from high levels of non-performing loans from that recession. So those profits you see might be quite deceptive, because in the sense that a lot of that has to go into paying or recovering some of these loans, or because they've made a lot of provisions and they're still making provisions. So if you drill down properly, you find that the capital adequacy issues within the banks have to be addressed. So the banking system is not as rosy as we think it is, because most banks, or in fact all Nigerian banks at a point in time, have to take a look at their capital adequacy, and they have to recapitalize. So while we might see some level of profits within the banking system, the system is not as rosy as it is. But yes, there was an opportunity and there was a distortion from the recession, which led everybody to stop lending and stop putting money into productive sectors, because treasury bills were higher. And we shouldn't also forget that also the foreign investors saw this opportunity and also came in through the NAFEX window, not only into treasury bills, but also into the capital markets, because the opportunities were there. However, I think the regulators now realize that as we're coming out of the recession, it's now up to the regulators to now shift that policy so that the policy framework can change. And I don't think it's about privatizing or government taking a stake in banks. It is the policy that you need to focus on. Because if banks can only mobilize deposits that are short-term driven, then they will only lend on short-term projects. And I think that's why it's important to understand this whole issue of financial inclusion. I'm sure Malam Modibo from Sigma Pension understands the way the pension funds have come up over the years to maybe close to 8 trillion in terms of pension deposits. But the pension funds also have been able to mobilize savings, but we've not been able to push it into areas of infrastructure development, because also all the savings, but not only from the banks, but also from the pension funds and also the insurance companies. Those are the three big institutions in any economy that help with funds mobilization. But unfortunately, there are not enough assets for all these big institutions to be able to put their funds they've mobilized into in a safe manner. So the pension funds also have to be very careful, because they also have to provide pensions for people over a long period of time. So they also go into a flight of safety. That's into treasury bills. The insurance companies, they also mobilize their funds. Where do they put it also? Everybody is going into treasury bills. And of course, the banks are also going into treasury bills, because they don't have enough assets to lend into because of the problems of the economy. So I would also caution on the fact that government should start taking stake into private banks. That is not the problem. It's not the fact that government owns a stake in these banks that you need to privatize. The regulatory framework is what drives how the banks behave. So with the sort of structure the central bank is putting in place now, post getting out of a recession, then if you have the right recession and you look at the behavior of investors, then you should be able to channel savings into areas that will drive growth in the economy in a safe manner or a risk-free manner. If those policies are right, then all those funds will move in that direction. And I think that is really what is important. You have the government banks, such as the Bank of Industry, the Bank of Agriculture, and of course the central bank with its intervention funds. They're providing single-digit loans for agriculture, and I think this is really where the problem. We need to develop our banks, our development banks, both the Bank of Agriculture, the Bank of Industries. Both those banks need to be heavily recapitalized, probably listed on an international exchange, to be able to mobilize serious funding that can provide the long-term capital that we need. the Nigerian commercial banks, the Nigerian pension funds, and also the Nigerian insurance people still do not have the capacity to provide the long-term funding that we have. It's also important to take a look at what we call the yield curve in the economy. Where are we investing? Now we have good positive results on our yield curve. 10-year bonds, I think, are being looked at. 5-year investment bonds are also being looked at. And I think that if we can increase the depth of the financial services with the more positive policies from the regulators, then we can drive the behavior of the banks and also the pension funds and insurance companies to put money into longer-term assets. But those development banking institutions like the Bank of Agriculture, Nexim, and also Bank of Industry especially, I think we need more of those sort of institutions, and they need to be as not even better capitalized than the commercial banks to be able to deliver on the sort of economic growth and development that Nigeria deserves.
Well, Tilewa, thank you very much. I mean, you've also touched on some other critical points. Gentlemen, when you look, say, for instance, at the banking subsector of the financial system, the evidence is clear that the regulator, or indeed the government, from time to time have made a series of interventions. And as he cited, the CBN is the one driving the anchor borrowers programs. There have been all kinds of funds that have been announced over the years, and yet the end beneficiaries, the end users, often complain of lack of access to these facilities. The CBN has been fighting tooth and nail, as it were, to ensure that there is no failure, in the banking system, as we used to have in the past. So when you had the banking reforms of 2005 and so on and so forth, and all the efforts that were made to ensure that the commercial banks remained alive, people then begin to wonder, what is the whole purpose of ensuring that the banking system is healthy to a large extent, and yet the banking system doesn't appear to be meeting the ends of growth and development. Let's bring in again Odun Marcelo.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think we need to decide what we want as a nation. Do we want to develop, increase our GDP? Are we an industrial? Are we aiming to become an industrialized nation or a service provider for other nations? We need to take a put, because we see we get confused. Now, I will speak as a manufacturer, because there are so many things that the bankers don't seem to understand. Now, for providing financial services, because we keep saying that, we keep talking about mobilizing funds to banks. As far as we are concerned, as a layman, all monies are in banks. Where are they? Are they in soakeaways? They're all there. They're in the financial sector, either in the insurance system, in the pension system, or in the banking system. Now, who are the regulators of these banks? They are also bankers. How can bankers regulate bankers? And government leaves them to do, just to continue. And I'm a realist. It doesn't matter what we want to say. What is the effect of all these decisions on the system, where industries are dying, where people can't do business? I think we need to look at, number one, regulation. As Dr. Modipo said, regulation. There is a big lapse there, and we have to take that into account. Now, Nigeria is seen as one big money-making center, where anybody can come, make money, and go. And one thing we have to know is that manufacturers, too, can trade. Doctor said it, that people trade and not develop and employ people from other countries, which is the truth. Manufacturers, too, can trade. So funding is critical. Now, I have a factory, and we still import raw materials. This is a country where we seem to have confused natural resources with industrial raw materials. They are two different things. We don't produce industrial raw materials. We're talking about strengthening MSMEs. Where we did get raw materials from? They still have to import. And there's a great need for funds. It takes about 3 months to get goods in here, convert them, sell. Now, that process has to be funded. You have factories keeping huge inventories. I mean, in business school, high inventory is poor management. But the reverse is the case in Nigeria. Now, what am I trying to say? We need to develop solutions peculiar to our own system and our desire. And the government must work on this and get everybody participating in the economy to follow those goals. If we want to be a trading economy, the government should, everybody should fall in line.
I was going to ask you, Mr. Odumasole, for you as a manufacturer,
yes,
what is your greatest challenge? Is it accessing the loan or being able to afford the loan?
Both. You see, I mean, most banks have not structured their funding to take care of this inventory issue. Manufacturing has to do with keeping inventory of imported raw materials. And most banks don't want to do that. They want a quick cycle. You trade, you bring it in, they see your stock, they fund it, you sell, you get your money. But a manufacturer needs money to import raw materials, not based on any transaction. Then he now begins to produce and sell. We have 180 million people. It's a huge economy, huge population for business. So we must take a decision. There must be a scheme to fund this. Now, even the rates are, I mean, they are ridiculous. I've said it before in similar forum that at 365 naira to a dollar and 30% or thereabout lending rate, we should all go and sleep. There's no point wasting our time trying to develop a nation at those rates. How can we have treasury bills offering? Why is the government paying for treasury bills? I mean, they are the biggest lenders. They can determine the rates. I do not agree with bankers that there are many who will deal with the dynamics, inflation, whatever comes up. So the government has to say, now, why should I put if I'm a banker, I won't lend money when there's a safer place. Now, why should government also be buying money? They are the biggest lender. They can say, look, we want to buy at 2%. If you don't like, take your money away. You know, so and they will force everything down.
All right. Well, Odun, thank you very much. Well, we have a number of tweets that have come in. Well, we are taking those tweets, but after this break.
Helen! Your kitchen gets 10 out of 10.
Thank you.
This also gets a 10. Should we see the toilet now?
Sure.
This gets just 1.
It is clean.
But not perfect 10.
Better than my detergent and bleach? Impossible.
Challenge? Try the new Apic 10X. Compared to bleach and detergent, Apic sticker formulation removes yellow stains times better, giving you a sparkling clean toilet.
Wow.
Now you also take that
Apic 10X challenge.
Also available in 200 ml pack.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You are here already?
No. Now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jam questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Better.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies.
The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, we're still here. It's Good Morning Nigeria, and we're looking at financial inclusion and, of course, affordability to financial services in the country. We have a couple of guests here in the studio, and we still have them. But then we've got your tweets coming in via our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. We will take some of your tweets and then get back to our guest. If you have questions, you can continue to tweet at us. Our guests, they're still here in the studio. The very first tweet is from Sunny Michael or Marco. He says, access in financial services in Nigeria is like a daydream because of incumbency surrounding financial institutions' operation in Nigeria. Interest rate is high and preconditions for loans are almost unrealistic. This is not the time this issue is being brought. The first time it's being brought for public discuss on NTA. I sincerely want to thank NTA for being proactive and sensitive on the state of the nation. However, I wish the authority takes advantage of this.
Another tweet from Dele Jack Solomon says, the financial benefit of financial inclusion on poverty reduction is dampened by cost of borrowing and degree of financial openness. Now, policy package must take into account the risk of interest charged by banks and financial exposure or opponents of cities and rural communities.
Sorry, Etiesi Udiyang tweets. It says, issue of financial services in Nigeria has been stringent and difficult due to obnoxious laws about loans and credit services. Federal government should come up with the measures that will help in financial inclusion and affordability in the economy.
And this is from Adebayo Adeiga. Says Nigerian financial institutions do not provide avenues to help SMEs in terms of loan facilities that will aid development.
And this one is from Low Alpha C. He says, financial services have become the exclusive preserve of the elites and companies who have all it takes to deal with these financial institutions.
And Fred Omosimo tweets, now the issue of banks not giving loans to SMEs is a major reason discouraging businesses in Nigeria. And
Festus Akimboyewa tweets, he says, government and regulators and industries should ensure there is a strong regulatory infrastructure needed to promote financial inclusion and improve access to affordable banking, saving products and insurance products, affordable credit and transactions and payment system across Nigeria.
All right, this is from Dele Jack Solomon again. So it says, many businesses in Nigeria have the potential to become bigger and more prosperous, but their growth is chiefly restricted by access to finance. Thus, there is a great need to deepen access to finance for Nigeria's small-scale business sector through increased use of reputational collateral.
This one is from Victor Hoswamwa. He says, compared to the population of the country, the percentage of those that have access to financial services is very low. We need to reduce interest rates on borrowing to a single digit. Microfinance banks need to be enhanced to enable them meet the original objectives.
And this one, we have it from Tagbo Ngene. It says, I want the banking experts to answer this. Should banks charge customers monthly ATM maintenance fee?
And this one is from Engineer Abdullahi. He says commercial banks are so cruel, the interest on loan is almost the loan itself.
Ibrahim Tudu has this tweet. In Nigeria, banks are the real impediments to financial access and financial inclusion. Loans, no credit facilities, high interest rates, and unprofessional conduct.
And this one is from Low Alpha. It says some average Nigerians are not encouraged to deal with financial institutions, especially banks, because of their extortive pedigree. And this one says financial services have become the exclusive preserves of the elites and companies who have all it takes to deal with it.
And we have this from Nibaromi. Nibaromi tweets, banks have stifled the growth of small and medium businesses in Nigeria, hence the economy is not expanding. Why can't we get soft loans at 2% for 1 year duration to 5 million SMEs rather than give loans to 5,000 big businesses at 27%? Common sense marketing strategy is what is needed.
And finally, this one is from Oninye Victor. He says, until the banks and the entire financial sector realize that they are essential platforms of development and liberalize their rigid services in terms of loan to entrepreneurs, the economy and state of unemployment will remain in a sorry state. Those are the tweets that we have. We still have our guests here in the studio. Continue to be a part of this conversation by tweeting at our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. Now, let's bring in Adamu Modibo. Kingsley was saying just now off the record that this has actually become a norm for financial, commercial banks posting at the end of the year. You're going to see huge profits, from the banks. And earlier you were speaking to the issue of regulation policies that could guide them, not having, bankers regulate the banking system. I'd like you to speak further on that. Yes.
First of all, we would like to understand certain things in the true perspective. One, the role of the bank is to mobilize savings and intermediate to be able to pass these savings to people who need the funds. Yeah. In other words, they are mediating between the surplus side and the deficit side, which is people who have money but they don't have anything to do immediately with it, they collect them as savings. And then people who need money but they don't have, then they lend to those people. In the process, that's why they make their money. Collecting the money on saving has a cost. They pay to the owner of the money. Lending it to the consumer of the money, or the companies, or the borrower, also has its own cost. So by the time you net off these two, is the profit the banks are making. But nobody knows what they pay the owner of the money. This is the point I'm making. Nobody regulates at what cost he takes that money. Government only regulates at what price he gives this money to the borrower. So we need to tackle that end to be able to know what exactly are banks paying for deposits that they are taking. Some banks will argue, rightly so, that cost of funding is not only the interest they pay to the depositor, it also includes the cost of energy, cost of salaries, cost of blah, blah, that they spend in terms of doing their own business. Whatever it is, let it be regulated, so that at the end of the day, the ordinary man in the street will enjoy whatever that is going to come out of it. Number two, money is bound to be expensive if there is no money for the banks to take on deposit. Since the advent of this administration, they introduced what they call TSA, the Treasury Single Account, that mopped all public sector funds, federal public sector funds, back into the central bank, away from the commercial banks. Yes, you can argue that, yes, that has reduced corruption. Banks were taking government money at 3, 4, 5%, but lending them at 30% to people. That has reduced. But the impact of that also is that the quantum of money available for banks to lend has substantially reduced. And it's a simple economic principle of demand and supply. If there is no much supply of deposit to banks, there will be the rate at which they lend money to the end user will be very high, because there's not much money on the ground for them to take on deposit. So there is need for government, in addition, if you say you are going to mobilize all public sector funds back into the central bank, regulate and create and diversify the deposit base of banks. And there are so many ways of doing that. Encourage SMEs to come up, to develop. They will create wealth, and this wealth, like my other colleague said, all monies are in the bank. They will not keep their money in their own company. Secondly, create a savings scheme for the 50 or so million employable Nigerians who are self-employed, making money, but they do not save money. Encourage them to save money. If, for instance, you succeed in getting 1 million people to save 100 naira per day, you're talking of about 100 million naira that is being saved per day. By the time you accumulate all this over a period of, say, 20 years, you will have trillions of naira there that the government can even come and borrow and develop infrastructure. Companies can borrow to operate. New businesses can borrow to translate ideas into business. But this saving scheme is not on the ground, it is not there. So we need to diversify our deposit base. Most importantly, if we want to see the effectiveness of banking regulation in terms of reducing interest rate, in terms of expanding inclusion, in terms of making credit accessible to people, both in terms of affordability and access, we need to look at how our regulators are appointed. I don't have any regret to say that there is no sense in asking bankers in the private world to come and be governors and deputy governors in central bank. These are people who have been running these businesses. They are shareholders in these businesses, and then you bring him and say, let him come and regulate the same business. How do you expect him to regulate such business and affect it to the benefit of the ordinary man? So there is a need for government or to National Assembly to look at this and legislate and bar all private people coming who are running businesses to come back and regulate such businesses. So there's a need for us to look at all these issues to be able to bring back sanity into the financial services.
Adamu Modibo, thank you very much. Let's bring in again Honorable Bode. You're in the number of issues still on the table. Let's have your take on all of this.
Thank you very much. Like you said, a number of issues. I will take you from financial inclusiveness again. How many of us Nigerians, adults, have access to financial services credit? The mention from Lagos about development finance institutions, DFIs, Bank of Industry, Nexim, I want to draw my brother's attention to the fact that these cannot be substituted to commercial banks. Why? Because most of these banks have only one branch in a state. Take Ondo State, for example. You have Bank of Industry in Akure. Anybody wanting to access any credit facility from this place, from about Ilaje, you have to travel 3 hours. That is why development finance institutions cannot be substituted to commercial banks. Recently, government complained about the commercial banks' inability to make payments of under the 5,000 naira to indigent under the scheme, this Empower. Can development finance institutions handle that when you are having only one branch in each state? So commercial banks must spread. One particular error that we have made in the past is the over-concentration under the consolidation exercise, which reduced about 124 banks, 129 banks to 21 banks, thereby reducing to 25 banks, later to 23, later to 21, now 23. A situation where competition has been stiffened. Because when there is no competition, prices go high, you become king. I used to check, if you are knowledgeable, when you enter banking halls, I used to tell them, I'm your principal, you are my agent. You are not supposed to grow wings as a banker. But bankers grow wings when competition is not there. Because you cannot just come out of the place and go to next door. Therefore, we must consciously look at how to expand commercial banking. And when I said, and I meant it, I want to maintain that statement that government must have a stake to be able to control. Look at India, look at China, look at Canada, look at US, look at UK. There is none of these developed countries that wholesale remove their equity from commercial banks. Because when you don't have a stake there, you can no longer direct the traffic or compass of lending, because all commercial banks will be basically business centers. So I have compared, I have borrowed from other nations that have developed by saying that government must still have interest, not in all commercial banks. For example, when banks have challenges about capitalization, instead of allowing them to go down, why not government, instead of lending, acquire 30% equity of the bank, allow it to stay, and have contribution on the board composition? It is then you can say, okay, look, I've assisted you to grow, you will have died. Therefore, I want you to give loans to SMEs or to agriculture. So a wholesale hand-off from commercial banks will not assist us. It is better we look at how other nations do it and still have interest in some commercial banks and spread branches. As at now, we have about 7 units of banks to 100,000 Nigerians. Whereas in developed nations, you have maybe about 25 to 30 units of banks and financial institutions. But when you remove microfinance banks, the figure is abysmally low. And should microfinance banks be considered, given the fact that microfinance banks give loans at about 7% per month? Multiply it by 12. Should we now use microfinance banks as part of the statistics? Except we want to legislate that they must give loan at an annual rate. But at the present rate, tell me who will borrow money at 10% per month or 7% per month and pay it on a monthly basis and still be able to remain in business.
Honorable Bodo Ayorinde, just before we bring in Tilewa again, I would like you to speak to this. You're talking about a return to the era of government stake in banks. If you recall, there was quite some contention almost 25 years ago when, for instance, the government was talking about golden shares in the acquisition of UBA, but some of those big banks at the time, and so on and so forth. But the argument for privatization was that, the government has had its day in the sun, let private equity come in and run the economy. Why do you want us to return to that era?
We have run it through. The EU came up in 1983 when government asked to withdraw completely. I remember I bought shares then. But how far have we gone since 1983 to 2018? What has been the performance of the banking sector when government no longer has equity in any?
Did you say 1983? What happened? I don't recall what happened in 83.
We're talking about between 1983 and 85, when the federal government rolled out the policy of withdrawing from virtually.
No, it's 93.
93.
93, yes. 93. I was wondering, yes.
It's 93.
Because the TCPC came on 1988.
Yeah. 93. Now,
yes.
How far have we gone since 1993?
But we have gone very far. The banks have really done very well in terms of modernization, in terms of expansion.
In terms of financial inclusion, in terms of expansion of the economy, in terms of benefits to productive lines, not in terms of benefits to trading lines. In terms of benefits to productive lines, how far have we gone since 1993? So if other countries that are more developed than us, that have greater GDP than us, that are among the $15 trillion economies, still have stake, not in all commercial banks, not in all, but a few, to be able to have influence in the compass of lending. I'm not saying we should go back to wholesale acquisition of banks. No. I'm not saying that we should go and acquire 51% and we allow bureaucracy control it. No. But 20-30% in a bank still mean that you are a stakeholder. But a situation where all commercial banks are virtually business centers and it is only profit that matters, then we are in trouble.
No, but
the fact.
What you can do as an equity holder in a bank, you can do as a regulator. You can sack a whole bank. The central bank under the law has the power to do so. We
did it in 2004 when we sacked, when 59 banks have to close job.
Honorable Bodo Ayorinde, thanks a lot. But one other point that you have made in addition to all of this is that, all right, why trying to shore up the finances of weak financial institutions, particularly banks, instead of just on-lending money, why don't you convert that into equity? You mentioned that point earlier. Let's bring in Tilewa Adebajo again into the conversation. Maybe you may wish to react to some of the propositions by the other guests. And also, perhaps let's speak to this. How can a Nigerian perhaps understand that, say, in the advanced economies, if you hear of interest rate at 5%, then that economy is in turmoil. And here we're talking about 25%. So it just makes that the cost of funds and the cost of living much higher than all of this. How do we understand that, plus whatever your reactions might be to the other points that have been articulated?
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, I think it's important to understand that we do have a robust financial system in Nigeria. The problem we have is the fact that only 30%, we've only been able to reach 30% of our population, which shows you that there's still a lot more potential within the financial services industry. And when we talk about the financial services industry, I think we should not only talk about the banks. The pension funds are there, and also the insurance companies. These are very, very critical players within any financial system because they are the institutions that mobilize funds. So I think we need to take a look at how to grow these institutions properly. The point I want to make is that it's not the banking system that is the issue. The problem we have in Nigeria is the macroeconomic environment. As long as you have a distorted macroeconomic environment, those distortions you're going to play into the hands of financial institutions. We've all known that 18% is treasury bills. So if you put your money into, why would you put your money into a deposit in a bank when you know that you can buy treasury bills at 18? And I think as the gentleman, the manufacturer has said, then everybody can go to sleep. We just put your money into treasury bills and you go to bed because it's a risk-free rate. If you create this sort of macroeconomic environment, and let's understand why we're in this situation at this stage, because we came out of a recession. Now, even in most of the developed countries you talk about when you have a recession, when you have a recession, central banks actually crash rates to be able to create the stimulus to grow the economy. But because of the inflationary challenges and all the other challenges we have and the distortions in this economy, it's an oil-dependent economy, it's not diversified. As you can see, we import a lot of things that we need that we do not manufacture. So all those distortions in this economy will lead the central bank to be able to, their primary responsibility will be to maintain financial stability. And thank God that over the recession period, the central bank has been able to maintain that stability, and we did not end up like a country like Venezuela, whereby we had hyperinflation. And in any central bank, that is always their state of mind. So let's understand that macro problem. The problem we have in Nigeria is a macroeconomic policy issue, which is compounded by our trade policy and also our investment policy. Now, these are macro issues you have to understand. If we do not control or change those macroeconomic problems, those distortions will lead to financial institutions seeking to be able to maximize profits from the high levels of treasury bills. And don't forget that it was not only Nigerian institutions and Nigerian individuals that put their money into treasury bills. International institutional investors abroad who were earning maybe 1% or negative return on their assets were also rushing into Nigeria to be able to invest in our treasury bills. And it is these foreign investors and their ability to come into Nigeria that helped stabilize our exchange rate, which was going to about 500, now down to 360. And I think that if we continue to put pressure on all these things, we can drop the Naira to about 250 easily, because, you know, that sort of stability has returned. So the problem is not really the banking system. The problem is not really, because in retrospect, let's take a look at it, for instance, with the GSM technology that we've had in Nigeria, we've had significant penetration, close to 85% penetration with GSM technology. And so banks themselves, even insurance companies and pension funds, are trying to ride the back of this technology, because brick and mortar is not really what is going on right now. And that's what they're trying to drive to push into it. And please, don't get me wrong, 2% of the population being able to access credit is a dismal statistics in Nigeria. And it shows us the level of not only our financial development, but our economic development and problems that we have. You cannot have a situation whereby only 2% of the population have access to formal credit. So there's some dismal statistics that we also need to address. But the problem that I see is more of a macroeconomic problem. And if you improve the macroeconomy, if you improve your policies, then you can begin to push attitudes, funding, investors into the right areas that can develop the economy. So privatizing the banks or government owning 20% of a bank, it's not really the issue. If the macroeconomy is still not proper and there's still distortions within the macroeconomic environment, you are going to get the same results. So I will suggest that it's important that we take a look at our macroeconomic reforms, take a look at our monetary policy, take a look at our fiscal policy, combine that with our trade policy, which is also quite critical to be able to create that sort of environment. And as the gentleman from the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria has said, it's not just about funding natural resources. It's also about funding materials available for industrial production. That is very critical. We need to be able to invest in value-added production so that those materials that can be used for industrial production can also be processed in Nigeria. So these are really, for me, the challenges that we have. And I think that we also need to understand that, yes, technology has improved with electronic payment systems, with the mobile technology, but yes, that has not really improved the level of penetration. We only have 28 million people, BVN, unique ID numbers. Only 28 million Nigerians out of 180 million Nigerians have bank accounts. Only 2% of Nigerians have access to credit, both private and corporate. So that in itself, for me, is really where the challenge is.
Thank you very much, Tilewa Adebajo. Let's quickly get your take, Mr. Oduin Masalu.
Well, I want to say thank you to Mr. Adebajo also. From one of the things he said, that foreigners came in to stabilize our exchange rate, which is better for us. For us to produce, export, and earn the dollars to stabilize our exchange rate, or to keep having people coming here to take advantage of us, and we call it stabilizing our exchange rate. Well, I think I don't blame anybody, it's just the government. The government has to take a stand. Whether we like it or not, to develop in this country, strengthen our GDP, we must produce. And to produce, the factors and indicators are clear. Now, I imagine government sits down and they look at their goals. Number one, we want to industrialize. And there is data to show how many industries have come up, how big are they, and how they are doing. And there's also data to show the performance of the financial sector. And as a government, you sit down and you look. Industries are dying. The financial sector, they are declaring profits. I mean, that should tell that something is wrong. Then a solution is designed to take care of it. You see, one problem we have is that we see ourselves as being on different sides. Bankers on one side, manufacturers on the other side, traders on the other side. We are all on the same side. We must come together to ensure that this country grows. And when it grows, there'll be more for banks to do. You know, there'll be more money to be, in circulation. Everybody will benefit. This issue of, we feel that banks see us as enemies, so to speak. But we cannot grow with it because, like in my own business, I've been able to plow back over the years. We've been buying diesel for 15 years. We can't even connect to the national grid because even if they give us the power for free, it will blow all our machines in a day. Fluctuations and everything. So we must use generators. You must buy a new generator. You can't use one generator for 15 years. You must keep buying. There's a huge cost. So when bankers say they have interest rates is because of their own cost, everybody has costs. Huge ones, even maybe more than them. So we must all sit down and government will say, we want to industrialize this country. Then we all know where we are. But we get confused. 1 minute government is talking about NROP, EROGP. The next minute they're talking about signing African Continental Free Trade. What are we talking about? We must take a position and say, I think it's for the government to take a position and say, this is what we want. Every player, this is where we want you to play. You must do this, you must do this, you must do this. And we get the country moving forward.
All right, Odun, thank you very much there. Let's get the closing thoughts now of Honorable Bode Ayorinde. With regard, what are the things that we need to do? Again, based on what the other guests have said, Tilewa is saying, look, we have to have a wide-angle view. We have to have a wide-angle view of the matters. Banking subsector being, as it were, just a subsector. Worry about the macro economic indices.
Well, thank you, and thank you to all the guests. Whatever other nations have done, developed nations have done that have brought their interest rate to 3%, we must look at them and do it. When it was necessary for us to leave the parliamentary system of government, we picked out and say, oh, this country is practicing the presidential system of government. We went there to copy it. And we have copied marriage systems also. But what I'm saying is that 28%, 30% cannot industrialize Nigeria. And if there are no industries, no employment, we will continue to grapple with the little resources we have on fighting corruption, fighting crimes here and there. We can only fight crime by providing jobs, engaging our citizens. Therefore, the present banking system, the present banking services cannot sustain, cannot promote economic development. If we want to promote economic development, we must reform our banking industry.
All right, Adamu Modibo, your closing thoughts.
Yes, I would like to call for government to look at the entire financial services sector and embark on a massive reform of the banking sector, the insurance subsector, and the pension. And the main objective should be to widen the base for collection of deposits and mobilization of savings. Secondly, I would like government to look at, or that reform to look at the issue of interest rate. How do we get to come down to single digit to be able to encourage production, particularly in the SMEs area? Government must find a way of providing funds at cheap rate to the SME, because that one will spur development in the economy and also create more jobs. And then lastly, the central bank itself. We need to look at the way central bank does their business and see what kind of necessary reforms we can embark upon. And one of them is that we must insulate the central bank from practitioners. There must be regulators. They must not have any stake. There should not be any conflict of interest in the central bank, so that no shareholders in banks and insurance companies and pension companies can be allowed to come and be leading the central bank, because the policy direction will definitely favor those industries where they're coming from.
All right, Adamu Modibo, thank you very much. I'm sure that there will be some reactions to what you have just said now, because people will argue, say, but you actually need experienced bankers to be able to deal with their colleagues or regulate their colleagues much more effectively. Plus, the point, Rhoda, if you recall, Nigeria, we often beat our chest, you know, in marketing the positives about our economy, that you have one of the highest rate of returns on investment in this economy, whereas we're actually doing ourselves greater harm inside. Let's take the last set of tweets now before we thank our guests for being around. Akeju Olagbaju tweets, now the rural population who are dominant in the economic growth have little or no access to financial services to drive the model of our development. Sadly, the financial service providers are allergic to operate in rural areas. This calls for concern.
Habib S. Umar tweets, says failure to repay is another factor that makes it easily access and affordable financial service difficult. Not even the small and medium businesses, but corporate organizations are making it difficult for our banks to give loans to the public.
All right, now Amen tweets, now what banks in Nigeria charge for savings transaction is what makes MSMEs not to approach them for loans at all.
Omar Bola Obab's tweet, he says, I approached a microfinance bank to execute a project worth 8 million naira. Sadly, the bank told me that it could only afford a loan for a period of just months. Not only that, I had to pay 6% each month to make a total of 36% in 6 months. How does the country progress with such economic trap?
We have this from Sebastian Eboma. Says Nigerian banks interest on deposit at below 7%, but give loans at above 20%. Charge fees for using their ATM cards, charge monthly for maintaining your ATM cards, and even deduct your money for their unsolicited mails. Yet they can't employ enough staff or pay shareholders.
All right, Festus Akimboyewa, he tweets, he says, you guys have said it all. Let's stop paper talking and act on Honorable Bode is here, and he'll help us to raise the motion at the lower house for effective submission. And
then we have this from Pastor, what you just read just now is from actually Adisa Adedigba. Yes, Adedigba, that's Adisa Adedigba who was tweeting just now. We have this from Pastor Adeonju. Now, I'm in total support of Dr. Bode, that's Dr. Honorable Bode Ayoride, that government should have equity of 30% in banks as to help the masses in accessing credit, which is currently elusive, and also control and regulate banking activities. Banks of today disregard the common man right from the door, and so on and so forth.
And Douglas, Prince Douglas, who says, thank you, NTA, Good Morning Nigeria, for this topic. It's quite timely. I really wish that this topic could be expanded by bringing in one of the bank CEOs to speak on how they can help us, the SMEs. And secondly, can we watch this on YouTube? Yes, Prince Douglas, you can watch this on YouTube, or you go to NTA News Now. That's our Twitter handle. There you'll get, of course, the link with which you can also watch Good Morning Nigeria. It's on YouTube immediately after this program.
All right, Pastor Adeyonju, last one. They say, according to Mr. Adebajo, it's really sad that foreigners are taking advantage of us to stabilize our dollar rate. How on earth will our government allow that rather than force them, as I say, foreigners, to play the manufacturing sector to create jobs, etc.? Well, gentlemen, and of course our viewers, that's the much that we can take. We really like to appreciate all our four guests. Tilewa Adebajo, financial analyst, regular analyst on Good Morning Nigeria. Thanks a lot for your insight. All right, we also would like to thank the chairman of the Abuja chapter of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Odun Emesalu. Emesalu, thanks a lot for being around on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Appreciation also to Adamu Modibo, who's a banker, a lawyer, and former CEO of Sigma Pensions Limited. Adamu Modibo, thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
It's also a politician, by the way. He's run elections on a number of occasions. Another politician with us here who also has financial background, of course, is Dr. Bode Ayorinde, member of the House of Representatives and chairman of the House Ad Hoc Committee on Economic Recession.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right. So your committee hasn't been disbanded. We're out of recession now. All right. All right. So that does it for our discussion segment. Let's go over now to our sports desk.